So I watched the new It movie the other day, and I don't understand how Pennywise operates. So, as I understand it, maybe it's explained in the book, I didn't read the book. As I understand it, he feeds off the fear of people. For some reason, only children, except he also affects adults. But in the movie, it's only children. Maybe in the book it says something else, but we're not talking about the book, we're talking about the movie. The new movie. And it is established at the very end that he can't feed off what's-her-face because she's not afraid of him. Yet she's able to float. I don't get that at all. But at the start of the movie, you got Georgie. And I guess, and so what happens is it bites off his arm, and Pennywise bites off his arm. But despite the fact later in the movie it's established he feeds off of their fear, he doesn't try to scare Georgie at all. He just says, "Give me your arm," like Sadie. And I guess maybe Georgie's fear was having his arm bitten off by a monster clown. But I guess anybody having their arm bitten off by a monster clown would probably be afraid too. So I don't really see that as some unique fear to Georgie. He wasn't really. I guess he was afraid of losing his boat. Except he wasn't. I guess he wasn't really afraid of losing the boat because, when he saw Pennywise, he wasn't really scared. He was sort of unsure of what to do of a clown in the sewer. And it seemed like Pennywise couldn't get out of the sewer because he's trying to trick Georgie to reach in so he can pull Georgie in. And I don't understand how that works for the rest of the movie, because as far as it looks like is that he can just bite anybody's arm off whenever he feels like, and that would probably scare anybody. So he could just do that whenever, but he doesn't. So why is Georgie different from everybody else? In fact, Pennywise is making him laugh. That's the exact opposite of what Pennywise wants to do. He wants to make people afraid, but he's making Georgie laugh, and then somehow lets him bite off his arm. Because later on it turns out, oh no, Pennywise isn't stuck in the sewer. He can just come out whenever he feels like. And there was one funny thing where apparently he had to break into that girl's house to grab her. Because when her friends come by to find her, the door's open. So presumably he had to walk in through the door to get her. And then he had to drag her out. They don't explain how he gets her back to his lair. But I guess he did. He's a ghost. He's a monster clown, so I guess he can do anything, except when he can't do anything. It's very confusing. And then other times he doesn't use anybody's. He uses just fear in general, despite the fact that he's trying to make people afraid. So the fat kid's in the library and he sees a balloon going. And now here it looks like Pennywise first lures people in and then makes them afraid. Except later on it doesn't do that. It doesn't always do that. It's very confusing. But there he lures the fat kid in with those Easter eggs. And we find out what the fat kid's fear is, and that's headless children running after him. I guess that would make anybody afraid. And there's that bully kid. He goes into the sewer, which I don't think a bully would actually do. But he goes into the sewer, and it turns out his fear are dead zombie children that have been burned up. Again, anybody would be afraid of that. I guess that's his biggest fear. Remember that. They established later on that Pennywise uses people's biggest fears against them. And so the fat kid is terrified of headless children chasing him, and the bully is terrified of burned up zombie kids. Which is weird because he's got his lighter and the hairspray or whatever it was. So maybe he's like Batman, the evil Batman, and he uses his greatest fear against the kids he bullies. I get it's really confusing. I don't understand it at all, and it's really confusing. Like, what does Pennywise actually feed off of? Because he claims he feeds off fear, yet other times we clearly see him using his big old teeth to bite people. Like at the end when they're in the sewer, he's pretending to be that picture woman, the weird face, and he bites the kid in the face. He goes like that. He's biting him. Like what? Is that what he does to everybody? Because that's the only time we saw him do that, other than the time when he bit Georgie. And then with that bully, it looked like he was going to bite the bully, but we didn't actually see what he did to the bully. It could have been fake because that's what he did with the OCD kid in the house. He was pretending he was going trying to scare him. And there, like, it makes sense. He's like, oh look, he's trying to scare him. And there's like he's just messing around because he's pretending he's mocking the kid because they can't breathe. He went like that. And I guess that makes sense for Pennywise because I guess he thinks it's fun, so he's mocking the kid and stuff. And it's really not clear if Pennywise can actually hurt people when they're not afraid, because at the beginning with Georgie's laughing it up, and then Pennywise bites off Georgie's arm, and Georgie was not afraid because he was laughing it up. And later on, it seems like they have to be afraid for him to be able to hurt him. Or that girl, he could have just went right in her face, and she wasn't afraid. So apparently he couldn't hurt her. But then at the end, when they're beating him with pipes, which by the way, it turns out that this monster who was able to kill so many people could easily be defeated by beating him with pipes. It seems like he's able to hurt, like he's trying to hurt them. He can't though because these teenage kids are just too good for him. And he turns into their fears, and he's just turning into random monsters for the book, which won't make any sense because in the movie he doesn't turn into some of those monsters. I guess he does in the book. So it's a reference to the book, but it makes no sense in the context of the story. Why is this turning into these random monsters when the other ones, it's their fears, like the leper or that girl's dad or something. And then now Georgie does make sense when Pepper's my cat. When Pennywise appears as Georgie, that makes sense because I guess you could say that what's his face's biggest fear was losing Georgie. So I guess even though that already happened, it's extremely confusing because it's never explained what's actually going on. And then there's the fat kid who's the historian kid. He said that when Derry was founded, all 91 people died. They just vanished. So first off, why did people move back to Derry if all of the people vanished? I guess there were houses there. And then how was it that none of those 91 people figured out they could just beat Pennywise with sticks or something? And then maybe they had swords. I bet they had swords or axes or something. They could have just hit him with that. But it turns out, no, they couldn't. Like 91 adults, and I guess kids were them too. They couldn't figure it out. Yet these kids, all we have to do is get pipes and beat them with pipes. And oh, look, we win. But even though it seems that Pennywise can also teleport sometimes, so he could have just teleported away. Oh, and at the end when they get to Pennywise lair, the camera goes up and there's this giant grate up there to the sky. So was there just a giant grate nobody knew about? Just like right off to the side of the well they went down? Or was Pennywise using his magic to cover it up? Like, did they build it and then they just didn't write it down in the plans? Because we saw the sewer plans and that grate was not on there. It's a big grate too. It's massive. It's huge. It's like so big that somebody could just fall through the holes in it. And I guess Pennywise had to be covering that up with his monster magic, because anybody could have looked down into the grate and said, oh, look at all these people floating around. And you know what? They don't really make it clear if all those people were dead, because he feeds off of their fear. So that would mean they'd have to be alive if he was feeding off their fear. And then, they don't say what happens. They beat Pennywise with pipes. everybody that's floating starts coming down, and then it just cuts to them outside. It's not clear when even this is. It seems to be later in the day, but the kid who got bitten, I guess they went to a hospital or something, even though before they didn't go to a hospital. So it's very confusing what actually happened. Like, did they tell anybody that everybody was down there? Or did they just leave the bodies? And how did they get out of the sewer? Because they had to climb down a rope to get there. That fat kid's not making it up. The kid with the broken arms, he's not making up that rope. Did they just happen to find another way? I burped. Did they just happen to find another way out? I guess so. But they don't show it. The movie is extremely confusing. When you have a monster and you make up rules for him, don't constantly change the rules without telling people. And now that I think of it, when he grabs the girl, she's not afraid. She's just pissed off at her dad. First, she's afraid, and then she's really pissed off at him. So she starts and it turns out the theme of this story is that you can conquer your worst fears by beating it with a blunt object. Because she beats her dad with the top of a toilet tank. I think that's what it is. They don't show where she got it. I'm pretty sure it was the top of a toilet tank, and she was pissed off, and then Pennywise appears and grabs her. So if he was able to do that, why did he have to lure in Georgie? If he could just grab anybody whenever he feels like. It's just confusing. Very, very confusing. And none of the reviews talk about the scene where they're at the quarry and they're naked. And they're just sitting around naked talking about the town. It's really weird. I never did that when I was 13. As far as I can remember. But they're just sitting there naked. All of them. It's just really weird. And what I didn't like was that they all were swimming. And then immediately after that, they're all completely dry. It's completely dry. It's weird. I guess the idea was that they were drying off in the sun. But they still didn't. Maybe the director, when he was 13, he ran around naked. I didn't. Nobody talks about that part in the review. The whole thing is pointless too. Like, the whole thing is supposed to show their friends, except we already know they're friends. So what was the point of all that? It's confusing. It's so confusing. I just rambled on about nothing for 13 minutes.